Chapter 81. How do you two know each other? You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. The red Ferrari quickly stopped at the side of the road. Qin Gingxin looked at her hesitantly. What's wrong? Jiang Ruolin said nothing and just opened the door and got out of the car. She looked at the police cars that had almost covered both ends of the bridge and walked towards them. Qin Gingxin watched her walk fast towards the police car. He then got out of the car helplessly and looked around. He also realized that there was something unusual about this place. His eyes changed and he quickly moved forward with his long legs. He quickly pulled Jiang Ruolin's arm. It's not safe here. Don't go there alone, follow me. Not safe. Jiang Ruolin looked back at him. They suddenly sent dozens of police cars around this bridge. I'm afraid there may be some dangerous operation underway. Numerous residents have been evacuated. Don't go there and cause more problems. Qin Gingxin was no longer joking. Instead, he pressed her shoulder and glanced at the black Land Rover. I saw Ziheo's car. With him here, nothing will happen. Let's go. Hearing Qin Gingxin said that, Jiang Ruolin stopped and looked at him in surprise. Stupid girl, I know you have a profound sense of smell and insight to get live news. But now is not the right time, it's too dangerous. Are you afraid that if you don't get the news, you will lose your salary? You work under Qin's company. Don't worry. Qin Gingxin chuckled as he pulled her towards him and walked back to his car. But before she could finish, she was dragged away by him. As they both returned to the car, Jiang Ruolin turned back towards the Karlmore Bridge. I heard that there were a few shootings in H City recently. No matter what happens, you better stay in the safest place. You are not allowed to go to a dangerous place. Qin Gingxin glared at her and started the car again. Jiang Ruolin pursed her lips and said nothing more. Ednel.co. Besides, based on my understanding of Ziheo, no matter what happens on the bridge, there must be a way for him to protect himself. Nothing will happen to him. Qin Gingxin said disapprovingly as he drove. Why are you so sure? Are you so sure that nothing will happen? Those responsible for the operation will also sometimes have miscalculated moments. She sneered. I will not trust them. I only trust Xian Ziheo. I certainly believe in his methods. Have you ever thought, how in these 5 years, he can make a lot of profit? Do you think all of his achievements were obtained by luck? While talking, Qin Gingxin suddenly raised his eyebrows and looked at her curiously. By the way, do you know Ziheo? Jiang Ruolin froze. Why do you ask? The tip of his eyebrow rose again. Why does your tone sound like you're so worried about him? It sounds like you're familiar with him. Jiang Ruolin. After you drank too much that day, we chatted for a while. She pulled the collar of her shirt nervously. Really? Of course it's true. Qin Gingxin nodded. So that's the case, no wonder. How did you and Xian Ziheo know each other? To prevent him from asking further, Jiang Ruolin changed the topic. Us. Qin Gingxin chuckled. When I was 17, I went to Harvard to continue my studies. I met him once and I detested him so much. That time he was a profound god who was famous in the United States, and in just 2 years, he managed to establish a small company of his own. We both always quarreled every time we met though. You two are always fighting. Jiang Ruolin was surprised. Qin Gingxin smiled. Men were so energetic when they were 17 or 18. Although Ziheo had restrained himself back then, he was still a young man. We often fought outside the school many times. You can never imagine, when we were 18 years old, a dozen people tried to attack us with knives on the Black Street of the Red Light District. Ziheo looked so gentle, and when he moved, 5 men holding the blade could not even touch a single hair on his body. At that time, I was completely shocked. I would never have thought he could move so quickly and agilely, and in just a few breaths, he overturned 5 of them. Zihao and I still had a normal relationship before that. You should know that the criminals in the red light district are not bigots, even the police cannot do anything to them. That day, he saved my life. From there, we both began to appreciate each other and become brothers. He graduated 2 years earlier than me, and after graduation, he returned to H-City to visit his family before returning to Boston. Did you know, he only needed 3 years to develop Xian Group into a global. How impressive is that? We have known each other for many years and I am very familiar with his behavior. Every step he takes will be carefully considered, and if he is genuinely convinced that there is nothing wrong, he will take immediate action. That's why I believe in him. It doesn't matter if his opponent is some evil person, he naturally has his way of doing things. Like I said, even if he is there alone, he will be fine. Jian Ruolin nodded and asked abruptly, but why did he leave his company and come back here to take over the family business? Why is he so restrained? Qin Gingxin's lips curved upwards, but he did not answer. His car stopped on the side of the road at Greenville Residence and he looked around. There are many houses here, where do you live? Ugh, I'll get off here. Jian Ruolin no longer cares about the question he did not answer just now. She was so afraid that Qin Gingxin would find out that she lived in a place like Greenville Residence and became suspicious, so she hurriedly opened the door and got out of the car. Hey, Ruolin. The car window slowly rolled down. Qin Gingxin looked back at her figure and loudly said, when you have a fever, you should take medicine quickly. Don't be like when you were a child, did you hear me? With that, he smiled, started the engine and drove away. Jian Ruolin's footsteps froze as she lifted her hand to rub her nose. Was her nasal tone sound obviously when she spoke? Qin Gingxin can detect that she had a fever. The chilly autumn night wind blew softly, and she suddenly shivered. A drop of water flowed slowly from under her nose. Jian Ruolin sniffled furiously. Damn it. It looks like I really have to take my medicine. The sky tonight was a bit cloudy, and it looked like it was going to rain. She hurriedly quickened her footsteps and walked towards the Greenville residence. Jian Ruolin felt her head became heavier. When she was little, she hated taking medicine but this time it seemed she had to. As soon as she entered the house, she went around looking for cold medicine. After taking medicine, she bathed in hot water at high temperature. After being suffocated by the heat, she covered herself with a towel and ran straight to her bedroom, where she had a good night's sleep. When she woke up the next day, she was overjoyed to learn that her flu was almost gone. Although she felt a little curious and worried about why they did not return, she also clearly understood that if it were not for Jianan, Xian Zihao would not have stayed here at all. What is there to worry about? Jian Ruolin looked at her empty house and scoffed. She was always on her own. She was used to eating alone, sleeping alone, catching colds, and taking medicine alone, but why she felt very lonely. Could it be that these 2 days of bliss had changed the lives she's used to? Jian Ruolin sighed and went to the kitchen, as she usually did every morning. She removed the only box of instant noodles from the fridge, boiled a pot of water, and went to the bathroom to wash. A few minutes later, the electric kettle began to hiss, which meant the water began to boil. Jian Ruolin ignored it, her mouth full of toothpaste. Lowering her head, she drank a mouthful of water from the glass, gurgled it a few times, and spat it out again. Suddenly, the sound of the door opening could be heard. She poked her head out of the bathroom glass door and saw Xian Zihao walking in with his coat on his arm, his shoulders covered in morning mist and dew. As soon as he entered, Xian Zihao detected someone's gaze towards him from the bathroom. He turned his head to look and saw that the little woman's mouth was full of unwashed toothpaste. Her moist eyes were wide open as she stared at him in surprise. Chapter 82. Since when you eat junk food? You are listening at novelfull.audio. His pretty eyebrows were raised slightly. You've gone dumb. Jian Ruolin snapped out of her daze and realized how embarrassed she was. She hurriedly closed the bathroom door and washed her face. 2 or 3 minutes later, she opened the door again and walked out. Xian Zihao picked up the newspaper on the tea table and sat on the couch. Jian Ruolin expected to smell the lingering smell of smoke and alcohol in her husband's body, but instead, she smelled a refreshing and soothing scent like a forest after the rain. You. Why are you here? She asked doubtfully. Xian Zihao looked up and looked at her. He put down the newspaper and didn't answer her question. Instead, he looked at her face and asked, "Why do you look so ugly?" "Probably because I didn't sleep well last night." Jian Ruolin touched her face and forcing out a smile. Xian Zihao looked at her for a moment but said nothing. He got up and was about to pour water when he saw a bucket of instant noodles at the kitchen counter. He stopped and glanced at her. Jian Ruolin pursed her lips and said, "Instant noodles are for me. I don't have much free time in the morning. It's good enough for me to have instant noodles in 3 minutes." Xian Zihao continued to pour a glass of water from the water dispenser. He seemed to have a habit of drinking a glass of water in the morning. This habit was the easiest way for him to take care of his health. Jian Ruolin noticed that as long as he was not too busy with his job, all his life habits would be very orderly and healthy. He went back to the sofa and picked up the newspaper again. While reading the newspaper, he will drink water. Jian Ruolin felt that Xian Zihao was acting a bit weird today. Since Jianan was not at home, they no longer had to pretend to be love and harmony. She ignored him and went straight to the kitchen to make herself a bowl of fragrant noodles. In this quiet atmosphere, only the sound of their breath was heard and the sound of Xian Zihao flipping through the newspaper in the living room. 3 minutes later, Jian Ruolin took off the paper cover on the instant noodle and stirred it with her small fork. She lowered her head and opened her mouth to eat. Suddenly, out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of a figure who unknowingly appeared in front of the kitchen door. She quickly put down her fork and looked at Xian Zihao, who was standing in front of the kitchen door with his hands across his chest in astonishment. He was looking at her with a smile that did not seem to be a smile. "You want to eat it too?" she asked stiffly. "Can you bear to split half with me?" Xian Zihao's words didn't sound like he was joking. Jian Ruolin was greatly embarrassed. She used her small fork and poked her noodles twice. "I never thought President Xian would eat junk food too." He raised his eyebrows slightly. "Why can't I eat junk food? I just got home early in the morning. As my wife, you are really lazy. You can't even cook another pack of instant noodles for me." Jian Ruolin. There's only 1 box left. If you're hungry, then eat it. I haven't eaten it yet. Jian Ruolin lightly pushed the bowl of noodles in his direction. Xian Zihao smiled at her. "I will eat. Are you going to watch me? I need to get ready to go to work in a while. I don't have time to cook, okay? Besides, the food I bought 2 days ago in the fridge has been eaten by Mom," she whispered. Jian Ruolin, "What day is it today?" Xian Zihao asked suddenly. "Weekend." She answered his question spontaneously and her eyes widened in shock. Jian Ruolin stared straight at the growing smile in Xian Zihao's eyes. He raised his eyebrows. Sunday. 6. Yesterday, she was too sick. Once she woke up, she forgot that today was the weekend. She immediately hit her head. Heaven, it's the weekend. I forgot. No wonder he came home so early in the morning, instead of going straight to the company. It's actually a weekend. Then what do you want to eat? I'll buy it for you. Xian Zihao's dark and calm eyes matched her bright and shy smile. Hearing his words, Jian Ruolin stared at his face with a non-smiling smile. You want to do it for me? Her words sounded very intimate, as if they were both truly loving couples in harmony with each other. Jiang Rulan chuckled. I mean, since this is the weekend, there is no need to eat instant noodles. I have to make delicious food to calm my stomach. Since you are here, I will make too. Xian Zihao did not move at all. After looking at her for a moment, he turned and returned to the living room. Jiang Rulan secretly glared at him from behind. She felt a little uncomfortable with the treatment that she received. Why did she explain it to him? He should be the one to thank her for cooking for him. Why did she have to explain so much? When she thought about it, she became furious. She put on her coat without saying a word, opened the door and ran out. 5 minutes later, she was back. Xian Zihao put down the newspaper and looked at the woman who had come back empty-handed. It's not even 7 yet, some supermarkets around Greenville residents all operate around 8 o'clock. The nearest market will take half an hour if she goes on foot. Jiang Rulan held out her hand. Lend me your car keys. I need to buy ingredients. Xian Zihao looked at her hand before his eyes glanced at her face. He just looked at her small face that was covered in dust. Aya, just lend me your car keys. I already had a driver's license while I was at university. Seeing that he didn't move, Jiang Rulan became anxious. Seeing his electronic car keys placed on the tea table, she quickly took it and ran out of the house. I have to hurry. After 7, the traffic will be heavy. I will be stuck in traffic jams if I'm late. 10 minutes later, Jiang Rulan came back with a defeated look on her face. She stood at the door and looked resentfully at Xian Zihao, who was looking at her with a calm and collected expression. Your car's steering wheel has an anti-theft mechanism, so I need your fingerprints. Why didn't you say that in advance? You really like to see me running back and forth from the parking lot, don't you? She looked sad. After running back and forth for half a day in the early morning, what was she aiming for? Did you give me a chance to tell you? Xian Zihao had an innocent face on his face. Jiang Rulan was about to open her mouth to protest when she suddenly remembered the scene where she took the car keys and left. Her face darkened as she became silent. What should she do? She was starving. Her instant noodles were probably cold to the point that they couldn't be eaten. Did she offend a devil this morning? She hated sports the most. After walking back and forth in the morning for almost 20 minutes, not a single task can be completed. Plus she's hungry. Jiang Rulan silently returned to the kitchen to check if there were any eggs left. She decided to make 2 portions of fried egg rice. Just as she was about to change into slippers and head to the kitchen, Xian Zihao stood up and said, I'll take you there. Jiang Rulan looked at him blankly. Did she hear wrong? Xian Zihao will drive her to the supermarket. It was rare for him to show such kindness when facing her alone, so it would be outrageous if she rejected it. She immediately grinned. Please, please. Seeing her flattering smile, Xian Zihao's mouth twitched. He walked past her with a meaningful look in his eyes and slowly walked out the door. Jiang Rulan immediately closed the door and happily followed him to the parking lot. Before she could get into the car, she suddenly remembered what she had seen yesterday at Carlmore Bridge. She could not stop herself from looking towards Xian Zihao's figure. However, she was too hungry now and wasn't in the mood to question him. Driving was faster than walking, and there was no traffic jam right now. Xian Zihao drove his car quite fast and within 5 minutes, the car stopped near the market. /n, starting from here, this book is going to pick up its pace. A lot of things will happen after this. Keep reading this book and don't forget to add it to your library. Don't forget to vote and drop a review. Your honest reviews are much appreciated. Chapter 83. Visiting Xian Residence. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Thank you. I'm going to buy some food. I'll be right back, so you wait for me in the car, okay? Jian Rulan pushed the door and got out of the car. The fragrant smell of breakfast coming from the market made her even hungrier. She rubbed her hungry stomach and quickly entered the market. The situation in the market in the morning was very chaotic, filled with the smell of meat, blood and fish. Although noisy, it was also lively. Jian Rulan squeezed through the crowd and started buying the ingredients such as vegetables and seasonings. She saw a piece of tofu with brine near to her. She thought for a moment and pointed at it. "Boss, give me 2 tofu." "Oh, little girl. These 2 pieces were bought first by this elder sister. Only this one is left." Jian Rulan looked at the piece of tofu that was a little scummy and waved her hand. "It's all right. Forget it. I don't want it anymore." As she turned around, she stopped on her track and saw Xian Zihao, who was wearing black cotton pants and a light brown shirt, standing 4 meters behind her. He was holding a large mushroom in his hands. Jian Rulan immediately blushed with shame and quickly walked over. "Why are you here? I feel bored sitting in the car. Why don't we take a walk?" Xian Zihao put down the mushrooms. He saw that Jian Rulan was already holding 2 bags in her hands. He casually took them and asked, "What else do you want to buy?" Jian Rulan was stunned by his sudden action. She watched him carry both bags in one hand and casually put the other into his pants pocket. Jian Rulan looked around the market as she said in a low voice, "I saw people selling breakfast outside the door. Why don't we buy some to fill our stomach first?" They both went to the stall and looked at the menu board. "I don't like eating buns, and I can't fill my stomach just by drinking soy milk and eating herbal tea eggs." Jian Rulan then looked around the stall. "Furthermore, this stall is not clean at all, and very expensive. It's better to cook it myself," she muttered in a low voice. She turned around and went to another tofu stall not far away and asked the boss to pack 2 pieces of tofu for her. After that, she bought another handful of vegetables that could last for 2 to 3 days. She turned to Xian Zihao who was standing behind her and smiled happily, "There's need to go out and buy vegetables for the next 2 to 3 days." Xian Zihao stood there looking at her, a small smile on his lips. Jian Rulan's eyes curved into a smile as she carried 2 more small bags and walked out with Xian Zihao. While walking, she raised the plastic bag in her hand and said, "I will cook these 2 pieces of tofu in a while. As for the leek, I will make it at noon. Mom rarely eats dinner, right? Then let's have some noodles that night. Even though you bought so many things, you still had to throw most of them away." Jian Rulan was stunned as she looked at his figure in confusion. She quickly followed him, and carefully put down the bag in the car bonnet and asked, "Why would I throw it away? If you don't eat it, I still have to eat it. How wasteful it would be if I threw it away. Tomorrow is the Mid-Autumn Festival. Tonight, we will be going to Xian residence until Monday morning. Can you keep these vegetables fresh for that long?" Xian Zihao glanced at her. Jian Rulan hurriedly sat up straight and looked at him in surprise. "Are we going to Xian residence tonight?" He did not answer but instead concentrated on driving. It was only until the 2 of them returned to Greenville residence, Jian Rulan kept nagging him again. "Why are you in such a hurry? Can't we go back tomorrow? I'm not ready yet, and didn't you say that my clothes were dull and ugly? I haven't bought any new clothes yet, I'm going to. This entire day is enough for you to do everything." Xian Zihao's voice was neither warm nor cold, but it successfully shattered the hope in Jian Rulan's heart. Jian Rulan felt dissatisfied, but she knew that she could no longer avoid it. She could only stare at Xian Zihao as he placed the 2 plastic bags in the kitchen. She sighed. Sooner or later, she still had to go to Xian residence. Since that was the case, what was there to avoid? Thus, she directly headed into the kitchen. 20 minutes later, a few simples and plain side dishes and fragrant rice were served. Xian Zihao was still flipping through the newspaper. From the kitchen, she could see that he was reading the political news section. It was the interview she had done recently and the script she had written herself. The food is ready. Let's eat. Jiang Rulan called him from the dining table. Xian Zihao got up and headed towards her. He looked at the dishes in surprise. I looked down on you. I didn't know you were good at cooking. Not at all, I only know a little bit. Jiang Rulan nodded as she ate the fragrant tofu stewed in the soup. Jiang Rulan always listens to praise for her culinary arts. When she was a child, she secretly roasted potatoes for herself over a charcoal fire. When she grew up, she secretly learned to cook from a servant in the kitchen. When she was 17, she lived outside with Yijuan and the money they earned was not enough. They both had to live in a leaky basement at that time. A pot of cabbage soup became their daily food. Even so, they both feel delighted just by drinking the soup. Xian Zihao glanced at her indifferently, saying, "It seems that my plan to hire a cook had to be cancelled. I don't have to ask them to come." Jiang Rulan was angered. I'm making you breakfast out of good intentions. Do you have to be so heartless? I'm not your servant. Xian Zihao smiled faintly. Because he didn't sleep all night, his voice was a little hoarse. However, he treated Jiang Rulan gently with a little warmth. He didn't speak again, so it was unknown what he was thinking. After the meal, no matter how unhappy Jiang Rulan was, she did not dare let Xian Zihao wash the plates. Instead, she took the bowl from his hands and rushed into the kitchen. Seeing her swift and nimble movements, Xian Zihao raised his eyebrows, thinking back to what Qin Gingxin had said before, that her life in Jiang family was not as luxurious as Jiang Bingqing's. Now that he had seen her skillful state, there was no need to ask any further, as he could naturally see that she had already experienced the world. Even if it was just a small blade of grass that couldn't be exposed to the sun often, even if it grew in the bitter cold, it was still stronger than any of the greenhouse's flowers. Xian Zihao couldn't help but glance in her direction. Jiang Rulan was tidying up the kitchen while quietly thinking that even if Mr. Xian and Old Man Xian did not like her, she should remain very polite. This was the first time she had gone to Xian Mansion, so she wonders what clothes she should wear and what gift she should bring. Xian Zihao really did not sleep much last night. Although he was tired, he did not return to his bedroom to lie down. He took his phone and left. It was now around 2 p.m., Jiang Rulan ran to the cloakroom on the second floor to find the clothes she should wear and brought to Xian residence. On her last birthday, Yijuan gave her not only a cake but also a white dress. She always said that this kind of elegant and refined dress wasn't suitable for her to wear to work, and she was afraid of getting it dirty by accident. That's why she hadn't worn this dress. When she put on the dress, she stared blankly at herself in the mirror. She couldn't help but be lost in thought. It was a white silk dress with fine thread wrapping around it. At her waist there was a gold belt with a string tied around it, perfectly depicting her tall and slender figure. Judging from the materials and cuts, this dress was definitely not cheap. Jiang Yijuan, you stinking brat. No matter how much money you earned, you can't spend it like this. Jiang Rulan silently cursed, but she felt this dress fit her perfectly. From size to color, it encompasses a simple design that will not be outdated. Although a little too feminine, she was still satisfied. Chapter 84. Visiting Xian Residence 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When she thought about Jiang Yijuan's gift to her back then, Jiang Rulan immediately opened her eyes with a smile. She spun around in front of the mirror and pulled up her hair. At 4 p.m., her cell phone rang. When she answered the call, she found out it was from Xian Zihao. He had just finished a brief meeting at his company. He parked his car outside the gate and waited for her. Jiang Rulan hurried to pack her things and left the room. She remembered the last time Old Man Xian had sent a car to take her secretly to Xian residence. Jiang Rulan took a deep breath and prepared herself to face Xian's family members. 2 hours later, a black Land Rover drove straight out of town and through a long road to the outskirts of H City. Mountains and fine waters hundreds of miles around surrounded this place. In terms of feng shui, this was a prosperous and profitable place and was the most popular place for the older generation to live. The car moved along a winding mountain road for nearly half an hour before finally arriving at the Xian residence. When Jiang Rulan got out of the car, she saw a very luxurious house. After walking past the garden estate, she saw a few simple yet luxurious buildings. In the middle, there was a 3-story building with a Chinese-style villa. Romantic and solemn temperament, high hall and elegant door, round-arched windows and cornerstone, all appear elegant. The lush bamboo stood in 2 neat rows along the egg-stone path that divided the lawn into 2, while the green leaves at the top gradually curled, forming a round curved roof that blocked the scorching sun and scorching heat of the day. When she was young, the first time she went to the Jiang family, she had looked up to the big house in a daze. But the Xian family villa has surpassed her expectations. The scenery in front of her was exquisite and it was full of trees and flowers. Although old man Xian deliberately maintained a low profile, he cannot hide the greatness of the Xian family that had been a legend for the past 100 years. Surrounded by the beautiful flowers and the shadow of the artificial mountain under the willow tree not far away, Jiang Rulan could see the green mountains and water in front of her. A stream that was flowing down from the peak of the mountain had formed a different kind of beautiful scenery in this place. I heard that a few years ago, a certain high-ranking official from within the country personally visited the Xian family and stayed here for a few days before leaving. Jiang Rulan turned her body to look at a statue of a soldier in the shade of a willow tree not far from her. Xian Zihao laughed without care. Xian residence was once just a very ordinary small building in this courtyard. Then, the city changed, and after 20 years of rapid change, many families moved out, but the old man was not willing to live in the city, and insisted on living in this old place for the rest of his life. So my father bought all the houses nearby. Although this place is quite far from the city, the air is fresher and the environment is more comfortable. Since the old man has a quiet personality, it would be perfect for this place to be Xian residence. Jiang Rulan nodded. As they spoke, the two of them were already walking to a 3-story Chinese villa in the middle of the area. She suddenly looked down at the gift box in her hand and asked worriedly, "They won't be happy with such a small gift, will they? What else do you think they need?" Xian Zihao suddenly grabbed her hand. He gently pulled her in front of him. Jiang Rulan was stunned for a moment. She almost bumped into him and stood beside him in a hurry. "But I feel this gift is not appropriate." Although their marriage was not based on love, but she still needs to respect Xian's family members. Jiang Rulan looked at the gift box in her hand. "Why don't we buy a more appropriate gift? Gifts are just gifts. It doesn't matter if it's more or less." Xian Zihao spoke indifferently, no longer paying attention to the anxiety in Jiang Rulan's eyes. Xian Zihao knew she was feeling restless, but they had already arrived at Xian's residence. No matter how much she wanted to retreat, where else could she retreat? Therefore, he pulled her in through the door of the Chinese villa. As soon as Xian Zihao opened the door, Jiang Rulan could smell the fragrance coming from inside. It was dinner time, and there seemed to be a servant preparing a sumptuous dinner. The glazed lights shone on Jiang Rulan's face, and she was dragged slowly by Xian Zihao. Damn it! He couldn't give her more time to get ready. He dragged her just like that. Jiang Rulan silently cursed in her heart. When she raised her head, she saw an old man with a cane, standing upright against the wall in front of the hall. Behind him was the sandalwood-colored staircase, and 2 elegant ink and water paintings. Old man Xian had just walked down the stairs and did not expect that he would see Xian Zihao with Jiang Rulan. "Grandfather." Xian Zihao opened his mouth first. Although his voice was neither loud nor low, Jiang Rulan nearly lost her grip on the gift box due to her shock. "Humph, you still know how to come back. Old man Xian suddenly hit the ground with his cane. Although he was old, his eyes that were still filled with spirit quickly swept past Jiang Ruolan's face and stopped on her face. A trace of displeasure flashed across his eyes. Jiang Ruolan quickly bowed respectfully to old man Xian, who was in his 80s. Greetings, Grandpa. Old man Xian acted as if he heard nothing and walked towards them without expression. Suddenly, he raised the cane in his hand and hit Xian Ziheo's body. Jiang Ruolan was startled. Did the Xian family always greet family members with violence? Seeing Xian Ziheo didn't seem to be in pain, Jiang Ruolan laughed every time he was beaten. Every time I come back, I will be hit by your cane. I'm used to it, but please don't scare your granddaughter. Law. Granddaughter. Law, where did this granddaughter. Law come from? Old man Xian looked at Xian Ziheo disapprovingly. He didn't even bother to look at Jiang Ruolan. He treated her as heir. Stop hiding. Come down here quickly. Jiang Ruolan, who was treated like heir, immediately stared at old man Xian, who was still holding his cane. She silently took a small step back. Sensing her movements, Xian Ziheo tilted his head and looked at her with a smile. In a voice she could only hear, he said, "Don't be afraid. Even if I am beaten, only I will be beaten." Jiang Ruolan glared at him quietly, but she didn't dare to say anything at the moment. She raised her head and looked up when she heard footsteps on the second floor. Bedo-dem. When Cui Liuxian's eyes met her from the second floor, Jiang Ruolan's expression froze. Cui Liuxian walked towards them calmly and quietly walked over to old man Xian's side. She raised her hand to support the old man's arm and said softly, "Grandpa, didn't I already say that you don't have to worry about me anymore?" As she said this, Cui Liuxian lowered her eyes and behaved as someone wronged her. Jiang Ruolan wanted to laugh. Xian Ziheo held her hand tightly as if he was telling her that she didn't have to be afraid with him here. Jiang Ruolan turned her head to look at the handsome man next to her. She calmed down a bit, but she didn't cower. Of course, since she was already here, she wouldn't cower. It didn't matter if she retreated or not. After all, she didn't have the foundation of emotions and she didn't need to care about Xian Ziheo's feelings or opinions. If she was willful enough, she wouldn't come today. She agreed to come here today because Xian Ziheo had protected her self-esteem and taken care of her feelings before. Even if she was about to face the blame and humiliation from the entire Xian family, she would not cower. How can I not worry? I know you are hiding because you didn't want me to worry. With Grandpa here, who dares to snatch my good grandson away? The old man put down his cane and suddenly turned his head to look at Jiang Ruolan from head to toe. The dissatisfaction in his eyes became even more intense. Jiang Ruolan wanted to open her mouth and explain, but she did not know how to explain it. Xian Ziheo scoffed, "Grandfather, you are making fun of your grandson." Snatched. Could it be that I am still an object to you? Chapter 85. Visiting Xian Residence 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Objects. Old man Xian looked at him and humphed coldly, "You little rascal, you are just king piece of sh*t. Xian Ziheo's expression darkened. Jiang Ruolan was trying her best to hold back a smile as she tried her best to keep quiet and put on an air show. Dad. Didn't you ask Lucien to play chess with you? The meal hasn't even started yet, so why are you coming down now?" Jean Anne's voice suddenly came from behind the door in the corner of the hall. When she saw them blocking the door, she immediately smiled joyfully. "Ruolan is here. When did you arrive?" "Mom." Finally, someone who was good to her. Jiang Ruolan politely nodded towards Jean Anne and handed over the gift box in her hands. "This is the tonic I bought for Grandpa." "This child. You are a member of the Xian family, why do you have to bring a gift?" As soon as Jean Anne saw the situation, she quickly walked over to smooth things. She happily received the exquisite gift box and took a look. Roland gave you deer antlers. Dad, I'll let you have some. See how considerate our Roland is. Old man Xian was just about to teach his grandson a lesson when his daughter-in-law suddenly came out and causing him to lose face. He didn't take the box, and instead, used his cane to hit the ground hard and said coldly, "Is our Xian family still short of this box of deer antlers until I need an outsider to gift it to me?" Grandpa. Cui Lucien immediately tugged at the old man's sleeve. "This is elder sister Rulan's first time coming to our house after all. If you say it like this, I won't buy deer antlers for you anymore. Why don't you want to buy it?" The old man snorted. "With the deer antlers given by elder sister Rulan, how can you use the items I bought for you?" Cui Lucien lowered her eyes. "Humph. This old man will only use the deer antlers bought by you. If I use outsourced items, I'm afraid I'll be poisoned to death." With that, the old man turned and walked away angrily. "Lucien, come with Grandpa. Grandfather, walk slowly. Be careful of your legs." Cui Lucien rushed and carefully supported the old man. Before she left, she looked reluctantly at the expressionless Xian Zihao before following the old man. "Humph, I won't die. This unfilial grandson of mine, how dare he fight me? Before Grandpa sees you marrying Zihao, Grandpa will not die. If an angel of death wanted to take my life, Grandpa would drive them away." Cough. Cough. The old man grew more agitated and started coughing again. Cui Lucien took out a handkerchief and helped the old man wipe his mouth. The old man smacked his lips in satisfaction. Seeing Cui Lucien helping the old man climb the stairs, Jianan gave a meaningful look to Nanny Cheng, who was walking. "Nanny Cheng, come here quickly." Nanny Cheng's eyes were quite sharp. When she saw the look in Jianan's eyes, she hurriedly and quietly walked to pick up Jiang Rulan's gift box and other gift boxes from Xian Zihao's hand. Xian Zihao looked at Jiang Rulan. She raised her eyes to meet him as well. "The old man doesn't seem to like me," she whispered. "I'm here. Will he be able to enjoy this mid-autumn festival? Why don't I just leave?" Before Xian Zihao could say anything, Jianan suddenly interrupted. "Rulan, don't worry, this is a problem with the old man. For the past 20 years, the moment he brought Cui Lucien to this house, in his heart, there is no one among the members of the Xian family as important as her. Not to mention Zihao, even Guiying, his granddaughter, was not spared from his rage." Hearing Jianan's words, Jiang Rulan didn't know if she was comforting herself. She turned to Xian Zihao, hoping to get confirmation from him. After that, she got the answer from his eyes. It looked like no one could do anything to the old man's prejudiced attitude. But because of this, she felt a little relieved and quickly said to Jianan, "Mom, I did not think too much. This marriage was initially too hasty, so it was natural that Grandpa was not happy." "Yeah, this marriage was indeed too hasty, but it has already been decided. Mom can only hope that you two can have a good time. As for Lucien, I hope she can think it through as soon as possible." Jianan didn't mind them at all. She gestured for them to enter. "Quickly go in and take a seat. Don't just stand at the door." The old man was just bluffing. "Rulan, you're Zihao's wife. No one can shut you out." "Where's Dad?" Xian Zihao casually asked. He and Jiang Rulan walked to the Chinese sandalwood bench in the middle of the living room. The rain was too heavy last night. Lucien was afraid of thunder, so I accompanied her for the whole night. I was coaxed back by Lucien this morning, so I didn't see your father when I came back. I heard from her that your dad had gotten addicted to playing chess with an old friend. He just called me to say that he should be in here in an hour." Xian Zihao nodded indifferently. He looked at Jiang Rulan, who was sitting stiffly on the chair. "You've been looking so terrible all day. If you're not feeling well, let Nanny Cheng take you to my room and lie down." No need, I'm fine. Jiang Rulan hurriedly said. Her cold did not seem to have healed and now she felt dizzy again. Still, it didn't mean that she would be spoiled when she first came here and left Xian Zihao to rest. Xian Zihao suddenly put his hand on her forehead. Traces of shock crossed his eyes. He asked in a voice that only she could hear, "Do you really have a fever?" Jiang Rulan immediately rolled her eyes at him. She slapped his hand away and said in a low voice. "Wasn't I cursed by you? That's how the crow's beak came about." Xian Zihao immediately laughed. Jiang Rulan's face flushed when she caught Jianan watching them with a smile on her face. She realized that the two of them seemed to be getting close to each other, so she lowered her head and said nothing. Even though she was at the Xian residence and was slightly nervous from the old man's earlier display of authority, she relaxed a little when she saw the genuine concern in Xian Zihao's eyes and the smile in Jianan's eyes. "Take a seat first. I'll go see Grandpa. If you are not feeling well, let Nanny Cheng bring you to rest." When Jiang Rulan nodded, Xian Zihao got up and went upstairs. Jianan seemed to enjoy being in the kitchen. While a servant was cooking dinner, her eyes occasionally glanced toward the kitchen as if she was afraid of losing something. Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore and ran back to the kitchen. After about 2 minutes, Nanny Cheng made some tea and placed it on the wooden tea table in front of Jiang Rulan. She smiled kindly and said, "Young madam, this is the old man's favorite drink, Tai Guanyin. Other than this tea leaves, I haven't had the time to prepare any other teas at home." "Thank you, Nanny Cheng. I'm not used to drinking tea, so no need to bother yourself. I usually drink plain water." Jiang Rulan nodded politely towards Nanny Cheng, who had a round but kind-hearted appearance. Nanny Cheng looked at her with a smile. "Young madam is being too courteous." Jiang Rulan smiled at her. "You've been with Xian's family for years. In the end, I was still a junior. It was just right for me to be polite." Nanny Cheng couldn't stop smiling. When she heard someone call her, she smiled amiably at Jiang Rulan before turning around to leave. Looking at Nanny Cheng's figure, Jiang Rulan couldn't help but be lost in thought. She remembered Nanny Wang, who had been taking care of her outside for several years. Since her mother committed suicide, Nanny Wang has sent her and Yijuan to the Jiang family. After that, she became a servant in the Jiang family and protected them very well, but when Jiang Rulan was 10 years old, she fell into a serious illness and passed away just like that. Therefore, when Jiang Rulan saw Nanny Cheng, she felt a sense of familiarity. She raised her head and looked at the bright light shining under her feet, at the floor-to-ceiling window, at the room full of expensive decorations and various types of beautiful porcelain vases. From the furnishings of the Xian mansion, she could tell that old man Xian controlled the whole house. Xian Zihao and her were like heaven and earth, and the difference between her and Cui Luxian was like mud in the sky. Previously, when they had married, it was only a matter of rights and interests, but if the old man forced Xian Zihao to marry Cui Luxian, then what would he do? Will he divorce her? Suddenly, Jiang Rulan heard footsteps coming from the stairs. She looked up and saw Cui Luxian standing on the stairs, looking at her. When someone says bad things to you, naturally those things really happen to you. Chapter 86. Confrontation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Jiang Rulan shuddered. For unknown reasons, she felt there were many things that Cui Luxian wanted to convey to her. The battle will begin now. Are you getting used to the Xian family? Cui Luxian walked gracefully step by step with a sinister smile on her face. She saw doubt in Jiang Rulan's eyes and walked towards her. Cui Luxian in front of her was different from Cui Luxian who was in Greenville residence. The person in front of her was the real Cui Luxian. The one in front of the Xian family was the fake one. If that was the case, then Jiang Rulan couldn't help but admire this two-face woman in front of her. Jianan had once comforted her, Jiang Rulan, when Chui Lucian had brazenly provoked her, and Xian Zihao had explained everything that she had said to her. He also once said that Chui Lucian was still immature, which was why she acted like this. Chui Lucian was the younger sister who was taken care of by Xian Zihao until she was an adult. No matter how stubborn she was, it was natural that he didn't think too much about her behavior. From Jiang Rulan's point of view, although she did not want to compete with Chui Lucian for anything, but from her, Chui Lucian, sinister look, she, Jiang Rulan, still could not prevent herself from being an enemy to her. Among women, especially love rivals, there was never true harmony. Not to mention, no one was stupid, so they all know how to control themselves. At this time, Xian Zihao was upstairs with the old man. Chui Lucian knew this, that's why she suddenly came downstairs and took this opportunity to confront her. That was Thai guanyin that Grandpa and Dad loved to drink. This is a good quality Thai guanyin delivered every year by a 100-year-old tea house in Fujian. Grandpa was too old to drink too much tea, but every day he would behave like a child and ask me to make him bubble tea using that tea. Chui Lucian's gaze landed on the teacup next to Jiang Rulan. I can see that the old man really likes you. Jiang Rulan smiled sincerely as she looked at Chui Lucian right in the eye. With you by his side, he will be the happiest thing in the world. Chui Lucian smiled proudly as her gaze shifted to two ink and water paintings at the bottom of the stairs. Both paintings were painted by me when I was in high school, and I gave them to Grandpa as a gift for his 75th birthday. They have been there ever since, for so many years. Jiang Rulan looked at the two paintings without batting an eyelid. So you painted them? I only know a little about this aspect, so I can only say that it is very beautiful. Chui Lucian looked at her for a long time before finally saying, Dad will be back in a while. Zihao is currently with Grandpa. Do you want to accompany me for a walk? Alright, I was just feeling bored sitting here by myself. Chui Lucian pursed her lips. She seemed to have noticed the softness and lack of edge in Jiang Rulan's words, so she restrained herself and walked towards the door. Not that Jiang Rulan did not know what Chui Lucian was trying to convey. She understood what she, Chui Lucian, was trying to say, her importance to the Xian family, her position in the Xian family, and even more so, her position in Xian Zihao's heart. However, Jiang Rulan deliberately acted foolishly and pretended not to understand what she said. When Chui Lucian didn't receive a response from her, that she will naturally stop using words to coerce her. If her guess was right, Chui Lucian would force herself to back down by using any means at all. This was just the beginning. Chui Lucian was smarter than she imagines. At the very least, in front of Xian's family members, she, Chui Lucian, was very good at restraining her temper, making people gasp in admiration. I grew up with the Xian family since I was little. Zihao was the only boy that I've only had around me. The two of them walked along a small path paved with goose eggs, passing through a scattered bamboo forest on both sides, and slowly paced around a perfectly formed swimming pool in the front yard of the Xian residence. Jiang Rulan didn't say anything as she listened to Chui Lucian's words. She quietly looked at the natural rocks around the pool. Some of the rocks had sharp horns. Zihao really loves me. Since I was young, no matter if I'm crying or making a fuss, as long as he's by my side, he will hug me, wipe my tears, pushed Guiying, who always bullied me aside, and protects me behind his back from time to time again. When I was very young, I've always thought that when I grow up, I'll marry him. Rulan, I understand that you are also a victim of those circumstances. Even you also disagreed with this marriage, right? Chui Lucian suddenly turned to look at her. Jiang Rulan raised her head and looked at Chui Lucian pleading gaze. She couldn't answer for a while, so she could only stiffly look at Chui Lucian's tantalizing tears that were about to fall. Did she guess correctly? Chui Lucian will force her to back down from this marriage. Before you get married, Zihao promised Grandpa that we would find a good day to fulfill his wishes after next year's spring festival. Initially, we were supposed to take wedding photos in the coming months and start testing the wedding dress, but the news from 2 months ago turned all the happiness we had planned into futile. Cui Lucien said with a wry smile. Zihao is very disappointed as well. But to appease the public opinion, he took responsibility for everything that happened and had no choice but to marry you. I know you are not happy with this marriage either. Jiang Rulan, this marriage was opposed by the Xian family. You probably should leave. Miss Cui, you may have misunderstood. Jiang Rulan finally could not hold it in anymore. Cui Lucien was such a *king hypocrite and two-faced. Since you wanted to be Lin Diyu so much, this old lady will also use Shui Bao Chai method. Cui Liuxian's pitiful acts may be effective against others, but not for Jiang Rulan. Cui Lucien was not stupid, but she, Jiang Rulan, was even more so. The decision of this marriage has never been mine. Whether it is because you want to comfort me or to sympathize with my misfortune, I think I can only thank you. As for my feelings for Xian Zihao, outsiders have no right to know and intervene. As for your statement that this marriage restrained me, it did not exist at all. Cui Lucien looked at her for a moment before giving her a gentle smile. In the end, you just don't want to let go, right? My husband, why should I let go? Jiang Rulan's clear and limpid eyes looked at her in such a manner. There was no hostility in them, nor was there any intention to show any signs of weakness. She was merely stating a fact. Since Xian Zihao didn't treat this marriage as child's play and would keep his distance from Cui Lucien, what reason did she, Jiang Rulan, have to back down? Your husband. The smile in Cui Liuxian's eyes finally evoked a bit of arrogance and coldness. Apart from the marriage certificate, and the media, who else knows that Zihao is married? Are you engaged? Has the marriage ever happened? Has the wedding ever happened? Have you met with each other's relatives? Did you take a wedding photo? And rings, do you have them? Seeing that the two of you are so distant and polite with each other, I believe that he has never had the interest to touch you, right? Suddenly, she raised her hand and pulled out a white gold necklace with a diamond ring hanging in the middle of its collar. The word WQ appeared to be engraved on the bottom of the necklace. This is the wedding ring that Grandpa asked Zihao and I adjusted last year. It's a pair of rings, one with my name engraved on it, the other with Zihao's name engraved on it. That ring should still be at Zihao's place. Have you seen it? Cui Liuxian's small face emitted a trace of coldness and resolution under the moonlight. She believed that Xian Zihao had always loved her. She stared at Jiang Rulan without blinking. Jiang Rulan, other than legally being his wife, what else could you be? Jiang Rulan looked at the arrogant Cui Lucien in front of her in silence. Do you really expect Zihao to fall in love with you? Cui Liuxian's smile suddenly became somewhat strange as she walked closer step by step. She whispered into Jiang Rulan's ear with a chuckle, did you know that when I was 19, I was already his woman? 5 years ago, when he came back from Boston, he drank so much that he couldn't even walk steadily, and was sent back to his room by the driver at around midnight. The driver was afraid that he would disturb his grandfather and father, so I was the only one who helped him go back to his room. You should be able to guess what happened that night. Xian family still doesn't know about this matter, and this is a secret between Zihao and me. Have you ever thought about it? Jiang Rulan was still looking at her silently. She did not react as to whether she believed Cui Liuxian's words or not. Chapter 87. Confrontation 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What a foolish woman. If Xian Zihao heard her words, did she think he will approach her in the future? When the proud and aloof smile in Cui Liuxian's eyes gradually faded, Jiang Rulan casually smiled, Miss Cui, everyone has a past. As long as my husband isn't involved with other women after our marriage, why should I care about his past? At the age of 20.8, he may have several women. Should I had to mind every single one of them? Most importantly, she did not believe Cui Liuxian's words at all. Based on Xian Ziheo's character, he knew very well who exactly he can touch and who he can't touch. His reason would overwhelm all desires. Cui Liuxian's expression changed as she stared at Jiang Rulan. She whispered in Jiang Rulan's ear in a low voice that only both of them could hear, "Jiang Rulan, stop pretending to be great. Ziheo and I have known each other for 20.3 years. Do you know him?" It was autumn and the night wind was blowing, causing people to feel cold on their faces. Jiang Rulan was fine, she could still withstand the cold, but Cui Luxian, who stared at her with red eyes, was trembling. It was unknown whether she was cold or angry. Jiang Rulan couldn't help but sigh, thinking that Cui Luxian was just a spoiled child. "Aren't you cold? If it's cold, why don't we go inside? What right do you have to talk to me like that? Don't use that hypocritical attitude of yours to put on airs with me." Cui Luxian pushed her away roughly. Jiang Rulan quickly stabilized her body and did not retaliate. She looked at Cui Luxian in disbelief. Cui Luxian was acting like an immature child. How many years had it been since Jiang Rulan behaved like Cui Luxian? After recalling her memories, she suddenly realized that she never acted so recklessly before. Jiang Rulan didn't want to retaliate against her because she knew the woman Xian Ziheo loved was not Cui Luxian at all. For a moment, she suddenly felt sympathy for the woman in front of her. The man she had loved since childhood never loved her. His heart had never been given to her and the marriage also was never belonged to her. She must be very, very sad. Although she didn't like Cui Luxian, the human heart was still made of flesh. She could still understand her, Cui Luxian, feelings. Just as Jiang Rulan wanted to console her, suddenly, a glaring light flashed from a distance, followed by the sound of a car engine. It was probably Xian Ziheo's father's car. Jiang Rulan didn't know what was happening, but the expression in Cui Liuxian's eyes suddenly changed. When the light once again shone on them, she suddenly let go of the necklace around her neck, and accidentally slipped the ring and necklace into Jiang Rulan's hand. Jiang Rulan was confused and wanted to return the item to her. "Ah!" Shouts of distress and the sound of Jiang Rulan sucking in a cold breath came from the side of the cold pool. No matter how she thought about it, she would never have imagined that this dramatic and bloody scene would happen to her. Cui Luxian fell into the pool behind her, and as if she didn't have a good grasp of the direction, her forehead heavily smashed against a sharp rock at the side of the pool. Jiang Rulan stood blankly by the pool, looking at Cui Liuxian's figure drowning in the water. For a moment, she was at a loss. She was so confused that she almost forgot to ask for help and even forgot to save her. She just stared in disbelief at the blood floating on the surface of the water. She didn't understand. L.C. To obtain Xian Ziheo, Cui Luxian was even willing to sacrifice her life. The headlights approached from a distance until a car stopped at the side of the road. The car door suddenly opened and a tall, muscular figure rushed out. Luxian. Xian Jian, who had just returned, never expected to see such a scene once he returned. Unsurprisingly, he glared coldly at Jiang Rulan. "Don't tell me you're Jiang Rulan." Jiang Rulan looked at Xian Jian, who was in his 50s but was full of righteousness, and guessed that he was definitely Xian Ziheo's father. Before she could open her mouth, Xian Jian suddenly turned around and shouted, "Old Li, save her now." Following that, Old Li, who had been listening to his orders, quickly walked over. Jiang Rulan's sharp eyes discovered that Commander Li was the 30-year-old young officer who had almost brought her to the Xian residence before. Commander Li quickly took off his jacket and jumped into the pond. In less than a minute, Cui Luxian, who was covered in blood, was successfully saved. Xian Jian looked coldly at the pale-faced Jiang Rulan as if he couldn't be bothered to reprimand her. Then, he carried Cui Luxian, who fainted inside the house quickly. Although Old Li was not as cold as Xian Jian's, he still didn't have a pleasant expression on his face. He was looking at her as if he was looking at a wicked woman whose heart was like a scorpion's. He frowned and said, "Try your best to beg the heavens to protect Miss Chui. If there is anything wrong with her, just wait for the old man to kill you himself." With that, Old Li shook the water off his body and quickly walked inside. Jiang Rulan turned around in shock. She just felt a lump in her chest. She didn't realize that another figure had gotten out of the car. The figure immediately followed Old Li. It was unknown when the old man Xian and Xian Zihao went downstairs. Xian Jian shouted for the doctor to come immediately. The old man looked at Chui Lucien, whose face was covered in blood, and asked in a trembling voice, "What happened to Lucien? Why is her face covered in blood?" "Lucien, don't scare Grandpa." Xian Zihao was only stunned for a moment before he looked at the silent Jiang Rulan who had entered the living room. When he caught sight of the necklace and ring in her hand, he frowned slightly. "What's going on?" he asked coldly. His gaze turned towards Chui Lucien, who was slowly opening her eyes in Xian Jian's arms. Zhanan, a few servants, and Nanny Cheng hurriedly went over to get a hot towel. Come. Quickly help Lucien clean up." Chui Lucien opened her eyes in a daze. Her forehead was already dripping blood, and her face was weak and pale. She said in a weak and hoarse voice, "Zihao.my ring." In the blink of an eye, everyone in the room looked in the direction pointed by Chui Lucien with her hand. In Jiang Rulan's hands were necklaces and rings that she, Chui Lucien, had always valued. Let her return it to me. Don't take it away. My ring." Tears rolled down Chui Lucian's face. The wound on her forehead as a result of being hit by a sharp stone was still bleeding. Her face was pale and she trembled in Xian Jian's arms. "Don't let her take it, bring it back to me. Damn it." Old man Xian suddenly dropped the stick to the ground. He no longer looked at Jiang Rulan and hurriedly said, "Hurry and bring Lucien upstairs. By the time the doctor arrives, it will be too late. Help her stop the bleeding first. I only have this one treasure. I can't let anything happen to her." Everyone who was still in a daze started to move as soon as the old man finished his sentence. Nanny Cheng with another servant, rushed forward and carried Chui Lucien, who had passed out again, up the stairs in a hurry. Xian Jian's hands were free and he quickly slapped Jiang Rulan's face. Five bright red hints immediately appeared on Jiang Rulan's face. She stood there stiffly without moving. She looked at the furious Xian Jian without a trace of emotion in her eyes. "Aya! Jian! How can you hit her?" Zhanan cried in shock and ran towards her. She held Jiang Rulan's arm with one hand and asked anxiously, "Rulan, what's going on? Is what Lucien said is true? Why are you still asking? I saw this woman steal the Liuxian's ring and pushed her into the pool with my own eyes." Xian Jian shouted. "This woman really has the most venomous heart. Jiang Rulan, forget about my Xian family, I've never agreed with your marriage. From now on, don't even think about stepping your foot into my Xian family's gate for the rest of your life. Get out." Scram. Jiang Rulan tightly held the necklace in her hands, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. She just stared at Xian Jian. Jiang Guanyu once said that as long as she obediently stayed in the Jiang family and did not cause trouble, nothing will happen to her. She should not think of being treated equally with Jiang Bingqing. Having him as her father was a virtue for her. In the blink of an eye, a few years passed. She did not think that she would suffer the same fate in Xian's household. Her nails dug into her palms. She couldn't glare at Xian Jian. Chapter 88. Confrontation 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Since he was not her father, she had no right or reason to rebuke at him. Thus, Jiang Rulan calmly lowered her bloodshot eyes and spoke in a hoarse voice, "I didn't push her, nor did I steal something from her. Whether you believe it or not, I don't care." With that, she pushed the necklace into Zhan An's hand. Jian Rulan took a deep breath as she forced herself to remain rational. She quickly turned around to leave the house that she felt was like hell. Scram. Scram far away. Our Xian family does not welcome such a vicious woman like you. Xian Jian cursed angrily. Xian Jian. Although Zhanan didn't stop Jian Rulan, she still felt her husband was too much. The old man had long rushed upstairs with Cui Lucian. Xian Zihao just stood there, looking at Jian Rulan's red eyes. He wanted to hear an explanation from her. Just as she walked out the door, he finally frowned and shouted in a low voice, "Wait." Jian Rulan acting as if she didn't hear him and walked out mechanically step by step. The coldness in Xian Zihao's eyes gradually increased as he lifted his feet and walked towards her. "Zihao, stop right there." Seeing that he dared to keep the woman, Xian Jian shouted and glared at him. Xian Zihao only paused for a moment before looking at Xian Jian, who was about to explode. "This matter has yet to be proven. Your slap not only hit your daughter in law but also my face. Just based on Cui Liuxian's words alone, you convicted Rulan. Which family's law does this belong to?" "You." Xian Jian roared in anger. Xian Zihao had already turned around and walked out. "Jian Rulan, stop right there." Jian Rulan was lost in her own thoughts. She hadn't heard the voices behind her. Suddenly, she was stopped by someone. She staggered and quickly stabilized her body. She slowly turned her head and looked doubtfully at Xian Zihao, who had a little bit of coldness in his eyes. Why was his expression so cold? Was it because he also believes in Cui Liuxian's words? The anger and humiliation from his father and old man Xian were not enough. Did he also want to give her another slap? Jian Rulan smirked as she hid her sadness. "If you don't believe me, I can accept it. I accepted this slap from your father because he is an elder. But Xian Zihao, before we know the truth, I hope you can at least give this nominal wife of yours some dignity." Xian Zihao just looked at her and pursed his lips in silence. Jian Rulan took a deep breath. "Since you are my husband, can you turn off your car identification system and lend me your car keys? This place is too far away from the city, and if I wanted to walk back, I'm afraid it would be impossible." "You want me to leave too, right?" Seeing that Xian Zihao was doing nothing, Jian Rulan smiled helplessly. She forcefully pulled her wrist away from his grip and walked briskly. She had only taken a few steps before her wrist was pulled back with a slight tug. She looked back to face his cold face. "Since you didn't do it, what's the point of leaving?" His voice was neither loud nor low, but it was like a drop of sweet spring water that had long since seeped into her heart and numbed it. Jian Rulan was stunned. The anger in her eyes gradually faded as she looked at him stiffly. "You believe in me?" She stared at his eyes with disbelief. "I do." Xian Zihao let go of her wrist and caressed her red and swollen face. The wrinkles on his forehead and the coldness in his eyes were clearly not due to her. His slender but warm fingers caressed her face gently. Jian Rulan hissed in pain. Dad was angry and he was an impatient person. Even Mom couldn't stand his temper, so let's talk about it after Cui Lucian woke up. "You will blame me when she wakes up." Xian Zihao ignored her words. He immediately turned around and walked back to the door, while saying indifferently, "You do not need to leave. Even if you want to leave, I will accompany you." Jian Rulan, we're husband and wife, understand? She did. She did believe him. Because they were husband and wife. Even in her dream, she never thought that Xian Zihao would believe her. In fact, she had long predicted that Cui Lucian might cause problems so that she would not have a place in the Xian family. Otherwise, why would Cui Lucian drag her to the pool? Jian Rulan knew that no matter how she explained, no one would believe her. That's why she didn't want to waste her breath and make herself look even more shameful. What's the use of explaining everything when no one believes you? However, what she didn't expect was Xian Ziheo's trust on her. Realizing there was no movement from her, Xian Ziheo, who was about to enter the house, glanced at her and said, "Come with me." Although she wasn't very willing, but Jiang Rulan touched her face and showed her grievance. She imitated Cui Liuxian's gentle voice and said, "Brother Ziheo, my face hurts a lot. I was accused of stealing your adopted sister's engagement ring and then my face was slapped too." The latter's face immediately turned black. Xian Ziheo grabbed her hand and pulled her into the house. Jiang Rulan noticed a young woman dressed very fashionable standing in front of the door with her arms crossed and gave her, Jiang Rulan, a faint smile. The smile in Jiang Rulan's eyes faded as she heard Xian Ziheo said, "Guiying, stay here with your sister. In law. I'll go take a look." The young woman standing in front of the door nodded in agreement. Her gaze once again landed on Jiang Rulan's face, causing her to feel a little anxious. The person in front of her was Xian Ziheo's sister, Xian Guiying. That Xian Guiying, who had been helping him manage the Xian's enterprise all these years. By this time, Xian Jian and Zhanan were no longer in the living room. They should have gone to check on Cui Liuxian's condition. Xian Ziheo went upstairs and left Jiang Rulan with his sister. Wasn't Xian Guiying, the granddaughter of old man Xian? Why did she take so long to return to Xian residence? Why are you standing there? Come in and sit down. I'm not my father, I won't hit you. Xian Guiying expressionlessly walked to the middle of the living room to sit. Her wavy chestnut curly hair hanging down behind her. She was dressed in the latest and most fashionable casual female attire and was dressed in dark style clothes. Jiang Rulan didn't expect Xian Ziheo's sister to be such a cold beauty. She was stunned for a moment, then returned to her senses and walked inside. She sat in the sandalwood chair across from her and watched as Xian Guiying took the fruit plate on the tea table and inserted the pineapple slices into her mouth one by one with a toothpick. As she ate, she raised his head to look at her, Jiang Rulan. Such a change in fortune, I am far away from this family. Now, there is another person in this family who will be the place to vent their anger. Today, Cui Liuxian was playing the part where she lost her life. No one can blame my dad for trusting her so much. Who would risk their life on something like this? Xian Guiying's smile was rather cold. Jiang Rulan was surprised. You saw it too, right? Xian Guiying took a tissue and wiped her hand. She was looking at the confused Jiang Rulan. I grew up in a situation like this. I was obviously a person with a Xian surname, but I, the second miss of the Xian family, always bullied the adopted daughter. The adopted daughter became a precious daughter of the Xian family. No one was as obedient as her. No one was as pitiful as her. No one was worthy of the old man's love other than her. Xian Guiying's voice was neither warm nor cold. There was no sour tone in her voice. She was very calm as if she was narrating a story. She would rather live in Boston to help her brother manage his business than return to the Xian family. Jiang Rulan could tell that this Xian Guiying was a very strong woman. She vaguely remembered hearing that Xian Guiying was 20.6 years old, and when she went to Boston, she hadn't graduated from university. If her guess was correct, it should be Xian Ziheo, who arranged Xian Guiying to follow him back to Boston. The scene at the pool earlier was also clearly seen by Xian Jian and Xian Guiying, who were both sitting in the car. Both of them could clearly see the situation from the same angle. People were always like this, they only believed what they were willing to believe. Therefore, Xian Jian believed in Cui Liuxian. Although Xian Guiying didn't seem to like Jiang Rulan's sudden appearance, she still believed her. Chapter 89. Confrontation 4. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Not long after, the doctor rushed over and hurried upstairs under the guidance of a servant. Half an hour later, Zhanan, accompanied by Nanny Cheng, went downstairs. Jiang Rulan hurriedly stood up and looked at Zhanan with a helpless look in her eyes. Mom. Jean Anne's benevolent gaze fell on her and she smiled. She walked over and said, "Good child, tell Mom what happened." "Mom, don't you know that Chui Lucien? I was kicked out of this house because of her. Now, she changed her targets, she also wants to drive sister.in.law away." Without waiting for Jiang Rulan to speak, Xian Guiying said this in an indifferent tone. Jianan looked at Xian Guiying in astonishment. "Guiying. I heard from your father that you all saw how Chui Lucien fell into the pool, right?" Xian Guiying sat on the bench with her arms crossed. She looked at her mother, who was looking at her with a serious expression. She knew that her mother wanted to hear the truth from her. Xian Guiying laughed coldly, "So what if I saw it? So what if it's not the sister.in.law who was pushing her? All we can do here is trust my sister.in.law. You alone know, even if Dad and Grandpa knew the truth, they still would not believe that Chui Lucien would frame sister.in.law." Jiang Rulan stood on the spot and didn't say anything. Jianan looked at her and after a while, she nodded, "I understand." She did not go to comfort her, nor did she say another word. Her usually childish and naughty nature eventually disappeared like a mist. Everyone had their own opinion, including Jianan. Xian Guiying didn't say anything else. She picked up the plate of fruit again and ate its contents. From time to time, she would glance at the expressionless Jiang Rulan. Her eyes didn't have any warmth. After about half an hour, the doctor came down, followed by Xian Jian. "You have to pay attention to Miss Chui's mood recently. I just saw that her pupils are unstable. It's due to psychological pressure. Try your best to not let her suffer any kind of shock." The doctor said as he walked, "Also, don't let her forehead get wet for a week. The wound on her forehead isn't very deep, and it doesn't hurt her bones, but a 2 to 3 centimeters long scar may be left on her forehead for the time being. If Miss Chui cares about it in the future, you can go to the plastic surgery hospital to remove the scar after she completely recovers." All right. As long as Liuxian's life isn't in danger, everything will be fine." Xian Jian nodded and turned his head to look at Old Li. Old Li knew what he meant, so he nodded and sent the doctor away. All of a sudden, only expressionless Jiang Rulan, Xian Jian, who had a cold expression and Xian Guiying, who was eating fruits one bite at a time, were left in the living room. Luckily, nothing bad happened to Lucien. Otherwise, my Xian family would have you, a vicious woman, pay with your life. Xian Jian looked at Jiang Rulan coldly with disgust in his eyes. Jiang Rulan took a deep breath and looked at the cold look in Xian Jian's eyes. "Mr. Xian, you sound so sure. Are you sure you saw what exactly happened? Have you seen everything clearly?" Xian Jian was expressionless. "What do you mean?" "I saw you push Chui Lucien with my own eyes. What else is there to say to her? Immediately get someone to send her away. Send a car to take her back to the city. Our Xian family does not welcome this kind of woman." Old man Xian's old but vigorous voice sounded from the second floor. "Let Commander Li send her away. Immediately. Tsk. No matter what, she's still my sister.in.law. I'm really not sure if Grandpa and Dad know who the real Xian family member is." Xian Guiying stood up and walked towards Jiang Rulan in high heels. She grabbed her, Jiang Rulan, arm and said, "My brother wanted me to stay with you, he wanted me to watch you and do not let you leave. Since Grandfather and Dad still haven't figured out the truth, I don't think you should leave. Come to my room, let's go." With that, Xian Guiying dragged Jiang Rulan upstairs. Old man Xian suddenly blocked the stairs with the cane in his hand and stared at Xian Guiying in anger. "Little Ing, you want to piss me off, don't you?" Xian Guiying could sense that Jiang Rulan was more or less resistant to the idea. She knew that Jiang Rulan would leave to avoid this matter from getting worse. She looked back at her. If you didn't go upstairs now, my brother will definitely be pestered by Cui Lucien. She wouldn't let him see you. You two are already married. Do you want to hand over your man to someone else? What are you saying? I'm the one who asked Siheo to accompany Lucien. Stop bullying that kid. Old Master Xian glared angrily at Xian Guiying. Yes, 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 my elders always doted and believed in that pitiful little girl surnamed Cui. They won't believe in their granddaughter and granddaughter. Law. There is no one else more important in this world other than Cui Lucien. Grandpa, I knew that you wanted to chase away and embarrass my sister. Law just because of Cui Lucien. Isn't this a bit too much? Xian Guiying held her head high. She looked at the old man's cane without hesitation. You've been behaving like this for years. You always accuse without knowing the truth. So what's wrong with me protecting my sister? Law. In any case, the person who I protected and has a legitimate relationship with my brother. What does Cui Lucien count for? You. Old man Xian's hand, which was holding the cane, gradually trembled. Guiying. Why are you talking to your grandfather like that? Xian Jian suddenly shouted. Xian Guiying snorted. She ignored the voice behind her and held Jian Rulan's hand tightly. You think I wanted to stay here? If it wasn't for Mom saying that I haven't been back in so many years and wanted me to meet my sister. In Law, I wouldn't have even bothered to come back and see the both of you. Grandfather, I am your granddaughter, not one of the soldiers you served when you were young. What kind of ability do you have to accuse people without investigating the truth? You've already retired for so many years. Ha! Old habits don't change, do they? My brother might bear with all of you, but not me. After saying that, Xian Guiying pulled Jiang Rulan down the stairs. If I don't go back to my room, then I have nowhere else to go. There are so many houses in the Xian residence, if worst comes to worst, I'll stay in the guest room with my sister. Law. With that, Xian Guiying dragged Jiang Rulan out of the house. Guiying. Stop right there. Xian Jian took a step forward. However, Xian Guiying acted as if she did not hear him and walked faster. Jiang Rulan, who had been forcefully dragged along, had a stunned look on her face as she looked at Xian Guiying, whose hair had been messed up by the wind. It's not easy for you to go home. To help me, you had a falling out with your family. Is it worth it? Xian Guiying's footsteps stopped. She turned and glanced at Jiang Rulan, then released her hand. She carelessly strokes her hair. To be honest, I really don't need to help you. But I like people that my grandfather and my father don't like. I like people who can threaten Cui Lucien. She suddenly laughed coldly and leaned against a bamboo tree, squinting her beautiful black eyes. My brother's heart has died once. I once despaired that he would accept his fate and marry Cui Lucien under the insistence of my family. This is the last thing I want to see. As for your appearance, though a little sudden, I do not need to help you from the beginning. Just now, you clearly did not explain too much, but my brother said he believed you. I think that's why Cui Lucien would rather risk her life to break you up. She can see that you are threatening her position in my brother's heart, and I am very happy to see that happen. Xian Guiying suddenly took out a small box of cigarettes from her pocket, lit one, and offered her another. Jiang Rulan waved her hand. I'm not used to smoking. Xian Guiying shrugged and did not force her. Leaning against the bamboo, she lightly smoked the thin cigarette. The thin smoke surrounding her face as she tilted her head and chuckled softly. It would be even better if my brother fell in love with you. At that time, Cui Lucien would probably really go crazy. Chapter 90. The Woman Who Killed My Brother's Heart. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Listening to Xian Guiying's indifferent and cold tone, it was not difficult for Jiang Rulan to tell how much she hated Cui Lucien. Now that she thought about it, it made sense. Her father and grandfather had transferred all their love to their adopted child, but this was fine. Cui Lucien, who was pretending to be weak but full of scheme, had forced the granddaughter to run away from home, and the most infuriating thing was her father and grandfather rather believed the adopted daughter rather than the granddaughter. It can be seen that the method Cui Lucien used against Xian Guiying in the past was no less than the method she had used against her today. Jiang Rulan, Jiang Bingqing, Cui Lucien and Xian Guiying, these four of them seemed to have the same fate, yet their paths were so different. On the grounds of what had happened to Cui Lucien, dinner was delayed. To fill the time, Xian Guiying took Jiang Rulan to another two-story building in the backyard of the villa. It was around 11 p.m. at night, and Xian Zihao didn't seem to have left Cui Liuxian's room yet. It was not known whether he wholeheartedly took care of her or he was forced by old man Xian to stay there to accompany her. Jiang Rulan should not have to worry about all this, but as she laid on the cold bed, she thought back about what had happened today. Do you know why there are so many things in this little building? Xian Guiying, who was lying next to her, suddenly turned around and talked to her. Jiang Rulan looked at her through the moonlight. Why? Because this is my brother and I's secret base. Every time I suffered because of my father and grandfather, I hid here and stared blankly at the wall. I did not cry like Cui Lucien, but I still felt sad. When I want to be alone, this is the place. Although my brother never protected me like he protected Cui Lucien, he would always come here and sit with me when I felt sad. He will sit by my side, silently accompanying me. My relationship with my brother is not like the relationship between other people's siblings. I also knew that he protected Cui Lucien because he really treated her as an outsider and I am his sister, so I have to take a step back. Xian Guiying said softly. Jiang Rulan smiled understandingly before she suddenly said, from your tone, it looks like you really admire your brother. Admire? Xian Guiying suddenly sneered, only a fool would admire and worship him. To outsiders, he looks like the lofty President Xian, the eldest grandson of the Xian family, but in my eyes, he is just my brother, the one who always quietly lent his shoulders to me. Xian Guiying suddenly got up. She switched on the light, got off the bed and rummaged through a small cabinet beside the bed. As she did so, she said, actually, this is my room. I keep many of my treasured items here. She took out an album from the cabinet and jumped onto the bed. She handed the album to Jiang Rulan and said, take a look. This is my brother's most valuable photo album since he was young. Jiang Rulan didn't expect Xian Guiying, who had been treating her coldly, to be so childish after getting to know her a while ago. She smiled as she took the photo album and carefully flipped through it. Jiang Rulan giggled when she saw Xian Zihao, who was about 3 years old, glaring at a photo while standing in the grass with a gun that was much taller than him. It actually looked like a real gun. It seems like old man Xian really did work hard to nurture him. Jiang Rulan only looked at the photo album in her hands without speaking, but in her heart, she was finally able to believe what Qin Gingxin had told her that night before. With the strong upbringing of his father and grandfather, it was no wonder that Xian Zihao's skills were so good. Xian Zihao didn't seem to like taking pictures. A large number of them were taken secretly by Xian Guiying, with many different angles, and most of his expressions in these pictures were calm. Until Jiang Rulan flipped the last picture. It was a picture of Xian Zihao with a woman. In the photo, Xian Zihao looked in his early 20s, with clean short hair and a soft smile that slowly overflows on his young, handsome face. The woman leaned against him and held his hand. She was not as pretty as Cui Lucien, but she had a pleasant, sweet smile on her face. Jiang Rulan couldn't help but stop her hand on the photo. Her name is Zhou Shufan, a woman who killed my brother's heart. Xian Guiying said lightly when she saw Jiang Rulan's gaze was fixed on the photo, Zhou Shufan. What a nice name. Was she the woman Xian Zihao had once loved? Seeing the doubt in Jiang Rulan's eyes, Xian Guiying tilted her head and smiled, it's been more than 5 years. I don't want to say too much. Don't mention this to my brother. Jian Rulan smiled calmly and closed the photo album in her hands. Alright, I won't say anything. They both smiled at each other. Xian Guiying pulled a blanket over them and turned her head to look at the moonlight outside the window. She seemed to have something on her mind. She suddenly became silent. Jian Rulan laid down and turned her head to look at Xian Guiying's side profile. She thought for a moment, then suddenly asked, Guiying, does Xian family only have 2 grandchildren? Only you and Xian Zihao. Chui Lucian doesn't count. I'm not talking about her. I'm talking about the Xian family's grandchildren. Xian Guiying stared at Jian Rulan in shock. After a long time, her eyes sparkled as she asked, do you know something? Hearing Xian Guiying's words, Jian Rulan's heart skipped a beat. Her thoughts flashed to Jiang Yijuan's god-like face. After seeing Xian Jian today, she found out that Yijuan was very similar to him. Jiang Yijuan was actually adopted by her mother in an orphanage, that's why she suddenly thought of this possibility. In the end, Xian Guiying's answer made Jiang Rulan felt more nervous. No, I'm just curious, just asking. She answered woodenly. Xian Guiying looked at her doubtfully. In the end, she didn't ask any further questions. Maybe it was just a coincidence, perhaps she was overthinking it. Jian Rulan secretly clenched her fist. The next morning, Jian Rulan woke up at 6 a.m. When she woke up, she found that Xian Guiying was no longer by her side. She could barely hear the sound of water splashing in the bathroom. Jian Rulan sat on the bed and heard a noise in the bathroom. She looked at the tightly closed door with confusion. She got out of bed and walked towards the bathroom. Xian Guiying's face was very pale and she looked lifeless. She was vomiting uncomfortably, but she seemed to be unable to spit out anything. Only a small amount of yellow liquid flowed out from her mouth. As soon as the door was opened, Xian Guiying jerked her head and saw Jiang Rulan looking at her with concern, then at the faucet. She frowned, Guiying. Xian Guiying paused for a moment. Her eyes were slightly red from retching. She lowered her head and washed her face with cold water. After that, she rinsed her mouth and slowly stood up. She faced Jiang Rulan's doubtful gaze with an expressionless face. No matter what you guess, don't tell anyone. Xian Guiying opened the door a little wider and walked out. Jiang Rulan immediately stared at her slender figure in astonishment. She felt suspicious and seemed to know something, but she did not want to say it without proof. Xian Guiying put on a dark curly-colored calfskin jacket and smoothed her hair. She glanced back at Jiang Rulan before saying, let's go eat breakfast. As she spoke, she opened the door as if nothing had happened and walked out of the room. Although Jiang Rulan and Xian Guiying became closer to each other after one night, they still have not reached the point where they can interfere with each other's privacy. The scenery of fresh green bamboo around Xian residence in the early morning was beautiful. They both walked through the stone corridors and returned to the front yard. Second miss, young madam, I was just about to call you for breakfast. Nanny Cheng walked over to them with a smile. Come in quickly. Xian Guiying said nothing, just glancing at Jiang Rulan, who was smiling at Nanny Cheng. Jiang Rulan caught her eye and read the meaning in her eyes. Xian Guiying wanted her to conceal the pregnancy. Jiang Rulan had never thought of herself as a good person, but she was certain that she was not a gossipy woman. Since Xian Guiying didn't want her family to know, then she must hide this secret. She nodded her head in understanding. Old man Xian was sitting at the head of the table, his eyes fixed on the 2 girls who entered through the door with a faint glance. When he saw Xian Guiying's soft expression, he seemed helpless and angry, but when he saw Jiang Rulan, he snorted coldly. Old man Xian closed his eyes, obviously intending to not see her.